broadcast.
Continue. So let's see where. Hello. I see participants are coming in. At least one. Yes, and I see like people are flowing in. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday evening across Europe. Hello, Laura. Hello, Ignacio, Celia, Renato, Valeria, Maria, and Louise. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. And probably Bernard, bonjour and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to give a brief overview while others are still joining, like how we're going to have the session today and how we're going to meet. So in today's webinar with EIT Health Alumni, you're going to hear from Maria Lucas, the CEO and co-founder of Zymvol, who recently was receiving the European Prize for Women Innovators for her impressive work in the field of biochemistry and enzymes. We're going to hear more about that when it's her turn. A bit on who we are, and about me as well. So I'm Timo. If you haven't seen me before at the other events, I'm the regional coordinator for the Nordics region at the EIT Health Alumni Board. And on my day role, I'm actually working at NurseBeam, where we help travelers who have got sick abroad. So it's a bit less now in COVID-19 times, but if you travel after this webinar in the future and do get sick abroad, please let me know. But more details into EIT Alumni. We are a network across Europe connecting more than 2,000 members with more than 30 active volunteers in the major European cities. Coordinating activities. Last year we did more than 25 unique events. This year we have been doing lots of webinars. This is one of them, and there are many more to come. The great thing is that if you want to cooperate with other healthcare innovators across Europe, this is the place to be. So we have pan-European network if you want to hear from academic or entrepreneurial side of healthcare innovation. Yeah, join in and discuss with other members. And besides organizing webinars, you can also get coaching. You can join major healthcare events at the preferred conditions. And definitely, I think the most important is to find the support from fellow peers. Because regardless what's the subtopic you're working on, startups, or even if you're doing research, often you have the same struggles and challenges in a way, and getting support from your peers, fellow innovators, is definitely one and the best ways to get and overcome those. But that's enough about me. I think you all came here and super excited to see what Maria has to say. Maria, in the beginning, is going to give a presentation of roughly 20 minutes. If you do have questions, there is the Q&A box just below me here. Press over there and write down your question. So we'll be handling all the Q&A straight after the presentation. So, and if you see that there is a question that is super exciting, somebody else has already asked, put the thumbs up so we know like what are the most interesting questions out there as well. We definitely have to answer. So don't be shy. I don't bite. Maria doesn't bite either. So let all your ideas out and let's get started. So I give floor now to you, Maria.
Thank you, Timo. Okay, let's see if I can share the presentation. Okay. Is this good? Oh.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you to all of you guys at home listening. It's late, and I'm sure you have more interesting things to do, so I'm going to try to be quick and to the point. When Robin asked me to give this webinar, I was a bit concerned because it's health, and even though I'm using enzymes, we're not exactly working in the health sector, but instead we try to refocus a little bit on my career and what I've been doing in terms of creating the company. So that's a little bit about that's what we're going to be talking about today. And of course, I couldn't help but start with enzymes. And especially if many of you are coming from the health sector, you of course know enzymes very well. Although when I'm talking, for instance, with investors, that's probably the first thing I have to define what an enzyme is. But I'm not going to do that today. But as all of you know, enzymes are well known for their applications and their function in life. But what many people are not aware of are the applications of enzymes in our everyday life. So some of you might be familiar, for instance, of enzymes in detergents, also in the production of pharmaceutical compounds, but enzymes are truly in pretty much every industry that we can think of. Food, you have about 50% of enzymes being used in food, but you also have, of course, enzymes in bleaching paper, biofuels, of course, cosmetics. So just think about an application and there's a very good chance that you have enzymes involved. Now, if you look at the global market of enzymes, of course, I'm talking about enzymes here mostly as biocatalysts, but of course you have also as a product, for instance, in food, and you compare it with the global market of catalysts, so normally organometallic or metallic metal catalysts, there's a huge difference. And of course, this means that there's a huge potential, but there's also, of course, huge limitations. Otherwise, this market would be much, much larger. And unfortunately, if you look at biocatalysts and chemical industry, the reality is that today, most chemical companies have either zero biocatalytic processes, and if they have, it's at most 5%. And this is a huge problem, especially if you consider that, of course, using enzymes means that you can have lower temperatures, lower pressure, and as such, lower investment in reactors. They're also, of course, incredible because they allow you to save water, and of course, they're a fundamental source of green chemistry. So the question I keep asking is, so why aren't there more biocatalysts used in industry? Well, unfortunately, the reason is that having an enzyme in a process, an industrial process, is actually quite complex. If you consider, for instance, to have, I'm lactose intolerant, and of course, all the products that you have that are for lactose intolerant people, of course, that's thanks to an enzyme. But now you have to put an enzyme into milk and then change temperature. You have changes in pH, and these enzymes, of course, they have evolved to be in living organisms. So, of course, putting them into a complex matrix like milk or detergents, keeping them stable for a long period of time, that's an issue. But if you use them even as a biocatalyst, now you have to put them in a reactor and, mix. And of course, all that stress, that's not something enzymes like to live within. And of course, as you know, also in chemical industry, often you do have complex solvents. So you don't have water, and instead you have organic solvents. So all of this, of course, poses a limitation to the use of enzymes in industry. And for this reason, one of the things that you normally need to do when you have an enzyme to use in an industrial application is that you need to evolve this enzyme, okay? And the most popular way and the most successful way you have today to engineer enzymes is actually relying on directed evolution, which has very well received a Nobel for chemistry in 2018. And basically this consists in speeding up natural evolution in the lab, okay? And this is extremely important, and it has changed the field completely. Because if you consider 20 years ago, most of the enzymes that you had, in industrial applications were basically wild type enzymes. Okay, so this has changed the field and the reason why many companies today can actually use enzymes. But there are other ways you can evolve enzymes, and one other very popular way is actually rational design. So this basically consists in taking a look at enzyme with a computer using a 3D structure and trying to figure out what's wrong with the enzyme, and then just introducing mutations like, very specific. But of course, they're like in two opposite positions. One you need to know a lot and you need to center. The other one so directed evolution has the advantage that you don't need to know anything. But of course, from the resource point of view, it's of course very expensive and time consuming. So in more recent years, you have another strategy, which is kind of the mixture of these two, which is creating libraries that are more focused to then be used in directed evolution. Okay, and this is commonly called semi-rational design. So what we have done in our company is neither of these three, but it's kind of a combination of all of them. So we have come up with a software that combines different levels of theory, and this is what we do in the company that I'm managing, where we are basically selecting positions which come to a certain extent from a rational approach, but then it's the computer itself that's actually selecting the mutations. Okay, so we select positions that come from bioinformatics, also from knowledge-based sources. And then once we have selected those positions, we mutate by everything or we mutate by everything that's useful. So if you have a polar residue that you know that in that position needs to be a polar residue, then of course you're only going to select polar residues, okay? And we do this at the million scale, okay? So we're kind of bringing some randomness into the computer. And this is what we have, let's say, done in our computer. And this is what we actually call in silico enzyme revolution. So we are actually trying to evolve these enzymes not in the lab, but in the computer. Okay, and this is what we do in our company at Zymvol. Now, and this is going to be the only slide on theory. For us to do this, we rely on, and I know many people probably are giving up at this stage, but for us to do this, we basically needed to mix many levels of theory. Okay, so for instance, if you think about quantum mechanics slash molecular mechanics, this is a technology that actually won a Nobel Prize in 2013. And its great strength comes from the fact that it mixes different levels of theory to be able to describe biological systems, okay? In our company, we go beyond this. We use docking, we use bioinformatics, we use QMMM, we use a huge array of tools that then allow us to have what we believe to be a realistic descriptor of what enzymes actually are doing. Okay, so this is what we're doing. So often people confuse bioinformatics with molecular modeling. We're using bioinformatics, and bioinformatics is essentially using data, biological data, to extract information, and very powerful, but we're actually doing 3D modeling using physics-based simulations. Okay, and this is what we do in our company. And I have here a very, very short movie of our technology, where basically what you see is, of course, we start with a 3D structure of the protein. We have a target small molecule. We need to study the interaction of this small molecule with the protein, and we identify which are the residues that are most important for the interaction between the small molecule and the protein. We select positions. So these are positions in the active site, but we also select positions away from the active site. And once we have done this, this is when we start doing mutations. Okay, so this is the basics of our technology. Now, if you look at what we're doing and you compare to drug design, so as you know, most of these techniques, or if not all of them, have been developed for the discovery of new drugs. What you have in that problem is that you have a target protein, which doesn't necessarily have to be an enzyme. Okay, you have a target protein, and what you're doing is you're finding small molecules to use on that target protein. Okay, and the most common technique, of course, is high throughput virtual screening, and this is quite extended. What we're doing in our company is kind of the opposite. Now, what we have is a known small molecule, and what we're trying to find is the protein, or in this particular case, the enzyme. Okay, so we kind of reverse the concept, but we're using the same techniques. And this is how we went basically from using techniques that have been developed for drug design to do actually protein, in our case, particularly enzyme design. Okay. Now, I already mentioned that we use different levels of theory. And the way we do it is we start with let's say, less complex techniques, where we screen millions of enzyme variants, where we rank them, we select the best thousands, we then take them to higher levels of theory, okay? And this is our software. And if you notice, absolutely everything that we use comes from techniques used in drug design, okay? Okay, this was the initial part of what we do at our company, and now I would like to go into the more entrepreneur part of how I ended up here, okay? So very quickly, I did my PhD in computational chemistry. I worked for many years applying and developing strategies precisely for drug design. So it's not any surprise that, of course, these techniques come from there. But then since 2013, I was actually involved in a large project with, I think we were 17 partners from Europe, including Novozymes, which is the largest protein producer in the world. And when we got involved in this project, our goal in the project was actually to take enzymes that had been evolved with directed evolution and try to figure out using computational techniques of why these enzymes were better. Okay, so our only job was to understand, nothing more. We started working, we started getting very interesting results, and at some point we said, if we can describe, we need to be able to also discover and engineer. And that's when we did the shift. We tested a few variants. It seemed to work nicely. And when the project ended in 2016, I was basically out of a job. And so were my other two co-founders. And we said, well, why not? Okay, so this is how we created a company. And that's us in 2017. So this is our company. We are now, I think, 15 people. We were 14 until I think a couple of weeks ago. We are located in Barcelona, Spain, in the Innovation District. And these are the co-founders. So myself, I'm a chemist. Emanuele is also a chemist. And Victor, he's actually a computer engineer. And I was asked to give some tips, and maybe a lot of you already know these tips, but these yellow things along the presentation are going to be what I have learned in this journey of the last 4 years as an entrepreneur. When you select your colleagues to create a company, I would say I'm married. I would say even more important than when you get married, okay? Because you're stuck with these people. So make sure you really want to work with them, because this is fundamental. And this is one of the things that I have learned. And I'm very lucky because it's very nice to work with Emanuele and Victor, but I think this would be the first tip. So you're thinking about creating a company, make sure you select the right people to get into this marriage, because it definitely is a marriage, okay? The second thing we did, of course, was set up an advisory board. So we're scientists. We had no idea about business. So we surrounded ourselves with people that know. So as many as you can, as talented and as wise. And as you can see here, it goes from business people to experts in computational techniques. For instance, Maria João, she was my PhD supervisor. Willem, he's an enzymologist. We have people from industry, and this is very important, okay? Because when you're at night going around with your mind and you don't know what to do, to have someone just one phone call away is extremely important. Now, the other point, which was also very interesting, and this was a new learning for me because I was a scientist, so I had no idea of all the things you could actually do, but there's a million acceleration programs out. Okay, and we weren't even convinced it made sense to get into an acceleration program until we actually found one which is called De la Ciencia al Mercat. It's actually a program here in Catalonia, and it was specifically designed for scientists that wanted to create a business, okay? And I think this was very important that we started with this, because it's not the same thing to create a tech-based company or create, a shoe shop or any other business. And I think this was important. Now, when we created the company, and I also wanted to mention this, we're a self-funded company, and we still are a self-funded company, okay? And we actually invested 41,000 euros in our company. And where did this money come from? Well, I just mentioned, I was out of a job, and my other two co-founders, they had just finished their PhD, so they were technically also out of a job. And I was getting ready to go elsewhere, okay? And I was already actually getting ready to go work in a company that I admire very much in Canada. And then my husband said, I would really appreciate if we could stay a couple more years in Barcelona, because I just got this job opportunity and I would really like to take it. I said, okay, well then let's see what we can do. So different countries have different programs, but in Spain, you can actually take your unemployment at once and invest it in a company. And that's actually what we did. Okay, so myself and one of the other co-founders, we had the full amount that you're entitled to. So we just took all that money and created a company. Okay, so that would be my next tip, which is be creative. And I don't know if it's behind, maybe I should move here. Be creative, because there are many ways to start a business, okay? And look at all the opportunities you have in your ecosystem, because we're actually right now in a fantastic moment in Europe to create companies. So the United States have been creating companies ever since they exist, pretty much. Europe is lagging behind, but Europe is now seriously investing in this. So most countries have some formula that can help. So just ask around. Acceleration programs. We entered in 4, and we were very fortunate to win first prize in all of them. And for instance, the first one was for industrial companies. That the first prize was actually a 3-week program with the Ricci entrepreneurs in Boston. We wanted at some point, of course, to enter into the North American market. It's not the same thing to sell in Europe or sell in the United States. So that's also very important. So the next tip here would be select very well the acceleration programs that you're involved in. Okay. Track record. We started at 3 people. We're now 15. Another thing that I've learned, this is extremely important. Your team is your number 1 priority. Okay. And my job as the CEO is to train and motivate the team. Okay. And it's also the same thing for any manager. So your job is to train and motivate your team. It seems simpler than it is. It's probably the most difficult job you will ever face in your entire life. Okay. Customers, we started working. So one of our ambitions was to actually work with as many industries as we could. Normally, simulations are a privilege of pharmaceutical industry. We wanted to make sure that any industry could have sophisticated simulations helping them in enzyme development. So as you can see, we started with chemical, biotech, and animal feed. And today we are working, of course, with companies in multiple sectors. Next tip. When you create a company, you create a company to help your customers. And I had this very clear from the beginning. I didn't realize that, but there's actually a lot of entrepreneurs around me and a lot of people that had businesses. Besides from taking care of your team, the next thing up there is you're not there to make money, you're there to help your customers. Because if you help your customers, the money will come. And then in terms of equity-free funding, so there are many programs available, and I'm going to take a couple of minutes on this because I think it's very important. So I mentioned before, be creative when you're looking for money. If we still remain privately owned today, part is thanks to our customers, but part is, of course, thanks to Europe and also the government here in Spain that has been supporting us from the beginning. So I'm going to take a few moments here. I'm going to skip this because I'm talking too much, which is very characteristic for me. But I want to take a couple of minutes here. Okay, so there are many programs. If you're not a tech-based startup, there are less opportunities. They're still there. So you have governmental loans, which are usually very good in terms of conditions. So you have a few years to pay back. Interest rates are quite low. So take a look at that, because normally governments are willing to invest at least as much as you've invested. So if, for instance, in our case, we've invested 41,000, the government would loan us at least 41,000. And if we were younger, and here the problem was me, so if you're below, I don't remember, I don't know if it's 35 years old or something like that. In our case, it was just the same amount. If you're young, they often are even willing to invest twice as much as you've invested. Okay, so take a look at that. And then in terms of grants, you have Europe that can help you support even just making your business plan. You normally also have grants local to each country. Neotech here, this is very specific here in Spain. It supports you not only in R&D, but also in business development. And this is very important because you also need to pay salespeople and marketing, and without any of these, you don't have a business. So look at these grants as well. If you are high in R&D, so if you need to do a lot of R&D, you can hire postdocs, you can hire PhD students. There are also grants to allow mobility. These are also very important because you need, so we're not just a company, we're continuously doing R&D. So our scientists need to know what's happening elsewhere. So it's important that our scientists are also allowed to go to other research groups or other companies to learn more. And then there's one particular instrument which is very important, which is SME Phase 2. I think now it has a different name, but this allows you enough resources for a couple of years for you to basically put your business together, especially if you're trying to do something that is really disruptive and really different. Okay, so do look at all the opportunities and find someone that can advise you, because this, I think, is the most important part. If you're trying to, if you don't need to do R&D, maybe this is not so important, but if you still have many years ahead of R&D, this is extremely important. Yeah, I think that just says, look at the opportunities. And finally, I'm almost done. Why Zymvol? I had two things in mind. So one was I spent many years getting a PhD and learning something very specific. There's not so many computational chemists out there. And then you find yourself, you're 40 something and you're in a lovely city like Barcelona and you want to find a job and there's not so many. And that frustrated me a lot. And I knew a lot of talent here. And I really wanted to create jobs. And I put here in parentheses highly qualified, because I will be, of course, happy to create any job. But I'm particularly happy if I can create jobs that are so difficult to find here. And as you can see, 78% of our staff holds a PhD. And we're also happy to, and I'm very committed to this, to have a balanced company where we have about 50-50 men and women, and we also have several countries here represented. The second thing that I really wanted to do was democratize the use of green chemistry. So we wanted to develop technology that was available, of course, to pharmaceutical industry. And you can see here that even though we started not targeting pharmaceutical, of course, eventually you end up working for these companies, which are, of course, investing a lot in biocatalytic processes. But one of our goals, and my goal personally as a person, is that I really wanted biocatalysis to be used pretty much in any industry. Okay, and Timo mentioned this at the beginning. I think the European Commission was happy that these were the things that we were trying to do in our company, and I think we have been able to show that we can do this. And I've been fortunate to receive this prize just a few weeks ago, and it's giving us new motivation to keep on going, because creating a company is not easy, and you need these things to say, okay, I'm in the right direction, and that's it. So sorry that I took a little bit longer than I was supposed to.
No, I mean, thank you so much, Maria. It was like very exciting. And I mean, my personal background, I've been also studying chemistry years ago, that it's actually very exciting to see that finally, like for many years, people have been talking about sustainability, that now we're actually getting there. We are starting to design like really green things from the smallest molecules on, not just like greenwashing, something that I did like a sewage treatment in the past. There are a number of things I'm sure our audience has questions. Anna, Celia, Ignacio, Ines, Laura, Luis, Miriam, Petra, Renato, Maria, Sonia, Tom, and Valeria. Feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. I think what was really interesting, what you mentioned, that you were basically out of job and it was 2016, and then you took charge of your life together with your co-founders. And I think it's very relevant now in the times of COVID-19, where like many people have lost their jobs. It's very tough. Companies are downsizing. And actually, it's super exciting to look back even also to the last big recession, 2008, when many great companies like unicorns were actually born back then. Like if you look like Uber, Airbnb, or a number of tech companies, they were also that people were broke, they had nothing to do, and then they were coming up with these innovative ideas. Maybe for one of the first questions, what we have seen people asking in our communities is how, like in the beginning, you had those three people, like how did you find your co-founders? because usually I think the PhD researchers, they are very like alone in their niche. That how did you find those co-founders of yours, and how did you actually also find those other 12 people that you have been hired so far? Because what we understand that talent, the fight for talent is super tough. Like there are some bigger corporations that usually attract people with very, let's say, big wages, that as a startup, you know, you have like very limited resources. Like how did you find those people to join your company?
Thank you, Timo. Yeah, I was actually very fortunate because Emanuele and Victor, they were both doing their PhD at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center where I was working before creating the company. So Emanuele and I, we had been working in that large European project for quite some years, and most of the technology was actually developed by him. So that was easy. So that was kind of the natural step. In the case of Victor, it was not as obvious. He was also in the same group, but he was actually in the software development side. But we knew from the beginning that we needed someone that could code within the company. And that was actually another point, because many of our advisors, for example, would say, do you need to have as a co-founder a programmer? And for years, as I mentioned, I have many colleagues that have created companies. And I saw, for instance, often the struggle of having, your chief CTO, and then the big company comes along and takes that person away, and you have a big problem. So for me, it was an obvious decision to have a programmer from the beginning. And it's not only a programmer, he also has a PhD in biomedical engineering. So those two people, they were very easy. The rest of the team, I have to say that 3 more also come from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center. So 2 were also, 2 are actually 2 of my former PhD students. So we were used to working together. We were already part of the team, and we were very lucky to convince them to join the company. I don't know. I think we've been lucky, because every time, the only time we had a hard time hiring was the first time we opened a position when we were a few months old. Okay, that was the hard time. Now we have so many applications. I don't know. I think we've been lucky, and also the team just stays with us, and I think that's part of our effort. So we're very careful in selecting the people that join the team, because we really hire to stay. So as soon as the person has been in our company for 1 or 2 years, we have a permanent contract, because that's the other point, is that I have never had a permanent contract. So as a CEO, I don't have a permanent contract, okay? And before, I never had one. So I'm very familiar with the situation of, wanting to buy a house and your salary is worth nothing. And this is so common for scientists, So I think it's a question of, it's not the ping pong table, it's, conditions. We have health insurance. I think that's how people stay with us. Maybe, we pay less than a large company, but I think people are seeing that we're in, for the long run, and that we're really trying to create conditions for a group of people that are so highly specialized and have such poor working conditions. So I don't know if this answers your question, but this is how we've been doing it.
Well, I think that's here, focusing on a team, and I also like this kind of slow growth that I think what my friends I know that work for Google, for example, that usually they get 1-year contract in the beginning, and then if all goes well, they get extended. We actually have some questions. There are some participants who have been brave enough taking the first step. Ignacio is asking, in regards of IP, how did you manage to sort it out? That because often I think in terms people are doing research as PhD, that IP belongs usually to university. And how did you manage to kind of bring your IP baggage with you and keep it nicely in the company? Maybe some tips on that.
So related with IP, there are many questions, of course. We were, I think, fortunate, because when I was still working at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, we actually brought the idea of eventually having a patent over what we were developing. We took this to the technology transfer department, and at that time they actually decided that it was probably not worth filing a patent. So again, luck played a big part because there was no patent. And on top of that, we were, of course, developing software at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, which we are not using in our company. Mm-hmm. So if you're creative, and I know many companies, at the end of the day, it's the way you do things, right? The software that was being developed at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center was mostly for drug design, and we were planning to do something else. And even though the original ideas were created there, they're publicly available. You know, we published a paper, so anyone can actually, and that's actually something that I didn't mention here. But one of our goals is to actually train people. I think biocatalysis through computer simulation should be done by the largest number of people possible. So we of course at the beginning are very sensitive with our software, but in the long run, we want people to simply learn and develop more biocatalysts. And related to that, what I think is important is protecting IP on proteins, not the software itself, okay? So you need to have a plan and get a lawyer, you know, that's what we did.
I think one was very interesting in a way that, you know, that they themselves thought that the idea is not worth it. And then you actually proved that the other way around. I think that's also very interesting with many, I mean, companies that we see super successful today, that in the first days, everybody thought that, you know, you're nuts, that you're crazy. Like I remember 20 years ago, I mean, I was doing the first Estonian student newspaper online and people were saying, Timo, you're crazy. Like who on earth would read news online, you know? And now 20 years later, who on earth reads papers? So
you have to have a certain degree of faith in yourself. That's absolutely true, because I did find all the obstacles and even other experts in computational chemistry didn't believe it was possible to do this.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's the very hardest part, that like, do you find like how, for example, has your, I mean, I know that sometimes even like my family thoughts like that I'm nuts, like, Timo, what are you doing? And like that to kind of like actually find that support from your family and friends, that they would like also say like, hey, go Maria, go, you know, that are your cheerleaders out there.
Well, my family, and in particular my husband, they were very supportive from the beginning. For whatever reason, I guess they know I'm crazy enough to just take a risk, and even if it doesn't work, it's okay. I'm going to learn in the process. But I have to admit that many colleagues would, you know, the typical tap on your back and say, okay, good luck, you know, she'll be out of business in 1 month or 1 year, you know. I did feel that, I have to admit. And motivation is very important in those cases.
And actually linked to that motivation and like being actually acting a bit different in that, like in a CEO role, we have a question from Laura, who is actually asking that, well, she's probably wondering that your tasks as a CEO are different, that you were a researcher. Is there something that you miss that, you know, being a researcher, you have like this kind of straight back, or now being a CEO that you have the full responsibility? Often you have like more questions than you have answers. Like, is there something that you miss in the past life being a researcher?
Definitely. The last 3 years were, of course, the beginning, which means that I had a lot of things to learn, and that kept me busy. And I didn't miss things so much because I was so busy learning so many new things that I didn't have time to miss. But now I do miss. I do miss two things. The safety. As a scientist, even if you don't have a fixed term contract, you're kind of safe. You know, you're going to have payment at the end of the month. You don't have to worry neither about yours nor about everyone else's. So that's one thing I miss, the peaceful situation of not having to worry constantly if there's enough money, because this is difficult. And I would say in my case, it's probably the most difficult thing of being a CEO. And the other thing I'm starting to really miss, and I'm trying to change a little bit, the reality is that I haven't done any research at all in 4 years. And I mean at all. I wouldn't even probably know how to run a simulation at this stage. So I miss a little bit, you know, doing research, trying to understand problems. But on the positive side is that now I have the possibility to, look ahead and decide whether I'm going to take a path or not. And before, I was limited maybe by a tech transfer department saying, no, this is never going to sell. So, pros and cons, but yeah, I do miss the science a little bit, but I wouldn't change what I'm doing today for what I was doing before. Definitely.
Cool. And I think, that's something that I also kind of relate, that maybe it's kind of like a school, that like when in the school you were studying like how the world works. Now, like usually running a company is something that you can't like learn in advance, and it's like a journey itself that kind of like you're back to grade one that takes all your time.
Yeah, definitely. And you're no longer 6 years old, Yeah. So it takes a lot of, you need to be humble enough to just say, I don't know what you're talking about. Please explain it to me, as if I'm 6 years old.
Yeah, I think actually one of the things you mentioned, I remember in the beginning of the story, you said that you often had to explain the enzymes for investors. And I remember when I was working for the government and communicating with different ministries, I discovered that even all the ministries, they speak different language. And how did you manage to kind of like learn that language of not academia, which is often very, let's say, obfuscating, complicated terms, the longer word, the better, into the business language where you have to be like a sixth grader, or if not 6-year-old, let's say the language of Donald Trump that everybody understands. That how was that journey? It was like learning Chinese, or?
It was very difficult, Timo, and I'm not entirely sure we have reached the final goal. So I don't know if you've noticed, we have some comics. So we've decided to try to transmit our message in a playful way, but we need to be very careful because, for instance, I remember at some point I was pitching for a group of people when I was in Boston, precisely in one of the accelerator, and there was a lot of people from the MIT. And the first comment I got from an investor was, "You don't need to explain to us what an enzyme is. We are all tired of knowing what an enzyme is." And then, of course, that's all very fine. But the reality is that most investors do not know what an enzyme is. Okay. So if you're smart enough, you will go to investors that work in your field. And as such, you don't need to explain what it is. But often you end up giving a talk for people that simply, and you need to explain your technology from the basics without insulting your public. And that is not simple. So that's why we ended up with comics. So my pitch normally starts, and I didn't present it today, but it normally starts with 4 or 5 slides where you have cartoons as enzymes, and I'm just explaining a story, and people just, even the people that know what an enzyme is, just laugh at it and say, okay, that's fine. But it's not easy, and it was one of the most difficult things to do, because when you have 3 minutes to pitch your company and you could easily use 10 to explain the technology, then you have a problem,
I think 3 minutes itself as well, it's kind of like complicated. I remember when once I was organizing a seminar, there was one professor, and I was like, we had lots of people. I said, like, you have 3 minutes, and the professor says, like, but I'm a professor, like I want to speak as much as I want to. And like,
yep. But you have 3 minutes, and they cut your word at 3, 5, 10 minutes, the most typical 5 minutes. And that was probably the most difficult exercise I did at the beginning. The first pitch at IQS Tech Factory was one of the hardest things that I ever had to do, because I'm not good at memorizing. I love giving talks, but I love to have time to express myself in my own words. And, I never memorized the talk. I just go with the flow, And in 3 minutes, which was what we had there, every single word counts. So every slide is worked by 4 different people to send the right message. And I'm not good at memorizing. So I've had pitches, that one went fantastic and we won, but I have had pitches where I just froze. And here I am talking about my technology and I'm going, what was I supposed to say here? And that's embarrassing, you know, when you're 40-something-year-old and you have been giving talks in all sorts of complicated crowds, and then suddenly you can't deliver a 3-minute pitch. That and I've had more than once where you get stuck. It's not an easy exercise, but I think it's a very interesting exercise. And one of the things that I regret, if I can use that word, is to not have learned many of the skills that I've learned in business before I was a scientist, because pretty much everything that I have learned would have made me a better scientist. Not necessarily because I would be doing better science, but as a scientist, you're also selling your science. So the way you give a talk, the way you interact with your public, the way you write down a text, everything, every single piece of advice that I have received in the company, I would have been able to use very, very well as a scientist. So if I could do something in the future, and I'm also trying to work there, is that more and more scientists get at least, you know, the basic learning of an entrepreneur, because it will help them a lot.
I think it's actually getting down to communications, like in a way that, I mean, after years of working in NGO field for the government and private sector, I personally feel that usually the government and NGO field and academia, they are lacking the communication skills that you know, usually the corporations, they are doing advertising. They know actually how to reach your mind, because this is the interest. This is like, if they don't reach the mind of the target group, they are dead. Yep. However, like in academia, like if your peers don't understand you, like, yeah, as you said, I mean, you still get the grant. I mean, you still have a guaranteed salary. The same with the government. Like, I mean, often I think they don't kind of have that responsibility that, hey, like if I don't deliver, like I might get fired, that, or like we don't have enough money in the bank account and like there is no salaries to be paid. That absolutely that responsibility, that is. And in that sense, we have a question from Renato, and before I get to the question, all others, Celia, Ines, Louise, Miriam, Maria, Sonia, Tom, and Valeria, you're still also open to send in the questions. Renato has a question, like, firstly saying, like, that's really inspiring story of yours. Maria, thanks for sharing. And what she's wondering, like, how the companies have been like opening up in a time that probably like when you started some years ago, I think especially selling to business, some companies might be, you know, like, give me the references, or like B2B sales is usually a complicated thing. Like, how did you manage to kind of open the companies up to actually cooperate with you and to work with you on those computational work ideas?
So we have been very fortunate, because from the beginning, all our customers have paid for the services. So we never had to do a demo to demonstrate our technology. But this means that you need to be able to give evidence of what you're trying to do. So it's not, you can't oversell, okay? What people that know me know that I will say whether it's right or wrong, but I will say what has to be said. You know, this is the truth, and even if I'm going to lose through it, I have to say the truth anyway, okay? And I think anyone can feel that. So if you're lying, if you're overselling, people will see it. So for us, the most important thing was to say, okay, we've tried this. We have this, this, and this. That's all. We've never done anything else but this. And this was the reality. We had the papers. We said, okay, we've sent 5 enzymes to the lab, and we got positive results. We really believe in this, and we've actually personally invested in this company. We didn't sell our idea to a VC and got a lot of money and then went selling. So we were so involved in the company, and I think customers could see that because B2B business is all about trust. It's, you know, it's not the pretty color, it's not the nice logo, it's whether companies trust you or not. So we had a couple of early stage customers that tested the technology, and we were able to help them. And then from there, it was not so difficult because then they were willing to vouch for us. So whenever we talked with a new customer, we would say, okay, this is all we have to show. We've only done this twice. And they would ask, what would happen? How often? It's like, we don't have statistics. I don't know when we will have statistics. We have a few cases, but we have really, really positive results. So that's how it worked for us. I think you really need to believe in what you're doing, and you need to be brutally honest, because if you oversell, then you'll have to come back and justify the bad results, So we were very careful also in selecting projects. So we did have some projects where nothing did work, and and the customer was warned from the beginning, this is high risk, probably nothing will happen, but if you really want to invest, go ahead. But we will always try to let the customer know what was the risk involved. Of course, it's R&D. There's always risk, and through the years, there have been projects where we really believed that they would work out, and then they didn't. But we always tell the truth, and when things don't work out, we keep on working. So it's not like, okay, it didn't work, we give up. No, we keep on trying to get things to work, and I think that's the way you open doors. It's just never giving up. But that's also one of the reasons we didn't go to pharmaceutical industry. So pharmaceutical industry is a very complex industry, and consider that absolutely every single competitor is working with pharma companies, right? So we wanted to first enter in companies that were maybe more receptive to trying a new technology without having, all these other companies in their ears. And once we managed to do that, we started to have some case stories, and then it was actually the pharmaceutical companies that found us, not the other way around. So you need some case stories, you read some really powerful case stories, and you need to be brutally honest. Otherwise, you will be, out of business in no time.
Yeah, I think maybe that sounds like previously you said like co-founders, this is like a marriage. Maybe finding those customers, it's also kind of like a dating, that you actually want to create that interest passively, that hey, we are hip and cool, rather than like going directly that like we are desperate that we need you. I think
that's the strategy of B2B, right? If you have a well-targeted B2B marketing strategy, then you need to be creating market awareness. So you need to be continuously informing your potential customers of how you could help them. And if you can reach them before they even know they have a problem or that there's a solution to their problem, that's the best moment to arrive. And those are things you then learn. You think about the seller's journey, but there's a buyer's journey as well. So you when I say that you're there to help the customer, it's for several reasons. It's not, of course, that's why you exist as a company. But if you truly understand your customer and you truly want to help, then it makes it easier also to find your potential customers.
I think exactly I haven't heard about a company that died because being customer obsessive. That this happens very seldom, but I think what happens way more often is that the companies are very self-centered. That we do this. And then it's like we don't care what's the reality. That in the end of the day, you actually are solving somebody's problem, and somebody has to pay for you to solve their problems, not you creating more problems. And
as scientists, we're very focused in our solution. It's in our DNA. We were so happy about our technology that's going to fix all these problems. That's all we want to talk about. But the reality is that we're here to fix problems. And you mentioned before in B2B, if someone buys from you and makes a mistake, it's even their neck. When you buy something for yourself, the worst that can happen is that you lose money. But if you make a bad decision for your company, then you can even lose your job. So it's you really need to be customer focused, because you're there really to help them. And there's a sentence that I always remember, which is, it's not about the 5 millimeter, how do you call it? I don't know the name. To make holes, it's about the size of the hole. So the customer doesn't want to, it's not about the 5 millimeter drill, it's about the hole. So the customer only wants to know if that hole on the wall is going to be, this thick. Yeah, they don't care if they don't care how you get there. But if you provide the solution, that's all they care about.
Well, and I think that's the main thing as well, that like actually talking in the value you bring. I mean, often we see companies, startups, especially I've seen startups, the blockchain ones, say like, oh, we do blockchain. We like blockchain this, blockchain that. And then like I was once in Singapore attending like a Asian Block Fest. I walked over to a number of companies asking, so what do you do? And they was like, what do you mean what we do? Like, we do blockchain. I'm like, yes, but like, I mean, like, what's the problem you solve? It's like, there doesn't have to be a problem. Like, give me 30 million, I will issue some tokens. I'm like, what on earth? Like, and I mean, that's why many of them don't exist, but it's super cool to have you here today.
Thank you.
And I see that a number of the speakers, Laura says, thank you, Maria, a very inspiring talk as well, that they have been really enjoying this. Is there also a way people could maybe reach you out, that if they have further questions, should they add you on LinkedIn or something? Like what's the best way to contact? I could see that some people are a bit shy. I think Louise, Maria, Valeria, Celia, Anna, is there a way they can reach you somehow?
Definitely. So, and that's probably going to be my last comment. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, LinkedIn is the #1 tool. So you can always reach me on LinkedIn. I try to answer if unless you're trying to sell me something, I normally answer back. But you also have my email here, flukas@zymvol.com. If there's anything I can do, even if it's just, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, can we just talk for 15 minutes? I'm very happy to talk with you if I can help with anything, definitely.
Cool. And before you all switch away, I have still a few slides to show. Let me share the screen. Where we are putting together, firstly, like, thank you very much, Maria. And now the great thing is that all the people out there watching our show today, if you have a great idea for another topic, you want to hear a great entrepreneur like Maria, want somebody else, write us, alumni@eithealth.eu, and we can also address those topics with the speakers you want to meet. Furthermore, if you have been watching this show, but you are not alumni yet, now you can scan this QR code, or you can go to, let me move myself, alumni@eithealth.eu, where you can also to become a member and get the free access, first updates for many other events like this today. And that's about it. Well, thank you so much. I think it was so much fun sharing this this evening. And I hope that most of the participants, they also found the motivation to find a way forward, that even though you might be out like Maria 4 years ago, out of job, out of your PhD, don't know what to do, talk to your friends. Come up with the idea, find the niche, and do a few more years. Get the prize across Europe. And I hope with Maria that, seeing that you now secured, you mentioned one of the slides I remember you shared was Nobel Prize 2 years ago, was on enzymes. I hope that maybe we can see you here in Stockholm getting also the Nobel Prize, maybe 2028, so we could all celebrate with a Nordic EIT health community over here.
Thank you, Timo. I find that hard to believe, but it would be wonderful, because it would mean there's a lot of biocatalysts out there.
Well, but I mean, that's something I remember what was also told by the guys at the supercomputing center, like, Maria, your idea is not that good. We don't have to file the patent for that. few years later where you are now. So it's like, I think Nobel is definitely within the reach, and at EIT Health Alumni, especially here in the Scandinavia with the Nordic lights in our background, we are very happy to welcome you in Stockholm, taking over the prize in one of the coming years. Thank you for everybody watching. The great thing is that if you want to share this episode with the friends, we'll be uploading this episode soon on our YouTube channel. So if you found a friend of yours you want to motivate with the stories from Maria, who couldn't join us today, share the link, and if you are not alumni yet, become a member and also ask your friends to join. So together we can make this world a healthier place, and EIT Health Alumni and our community is here helping you out all through the struggles to make that healthy world come true. Cool, but thank you, Maria, and thank you for watching, Ana, Celia, Ignacio, Ines, Renato, Maria, and Valeria.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Maria, you will be on, you stay on the line, and others